All right, guys, in this section, we're going to talk about dialing in your niche and your avatar. Niche meaning the market or the industry you're going after, and your avatar meaning the actual person you're reaching out to and trying to contact. This part is super, super important. You have to be very, very specific and laser focused when you're going out to doing prospecting, because the more specific you can be with your marketing, with as far as who you're reaching out to, the more specific you can be in your messaging. The more specific you can really articulate the problems or the goals that that person has, and actually you're going to get their interest. So it's very, very important to be very specific. You don't want to be trying to market to everybody. Even if your business serves a few different niches in a few different industries, you have to pick one for your marketing campaign so that everything can be very focused on that. And this is really one of the most important elements of your outbound prospecting. There's really two main things that determine how well your cold outreach goes. And one is who you're reaching out to. Does that person really need what you're offering? And the second is your actual messaging, which we'll cover later. So this is huge, really important to take the time to get this right. The first thing I want to explain to you is our niche analysis template. This template you'll see in the resources, and ultimately this is going to help you prioritize the different niches your business might serve. Now I'm sure a few of you watching this might be at different stages in your business. Maybe some of you are just starting out and you don't even know what niche to go after in the beginning. This would be really helpful for you. But if you have an established business already and you've been doing this a while, maybe you serve a few different industries and you're trying to prioritize, maybe you want to shift your focus to one. Or maybe you're pretty clear on your industries, but you're trying to choose some sub-niches or really see if you can get more specific. No matter what the case may be, the point of the niche analysis template is to help you kind of rank and prioritize the different possible niches you could focus your marketing efforts on. You've probably heard this before, but the riches are in the niches. The more you can niche down, the better, because again, you can be more specific in all of your messaging and really speak to that exact person and show them that you really understand them. So the niche analysis template will help you kind of prioritize the different possible niches against one another. Across the top, you'll basically put the name of the niche. Maybe you have a few, maybe you're trying to compare and prioritize like 3 to 5. So across the top is when you put the name of the different niches you're considering. And then in each of the rows below, what you're doing is you're assigning a rating of 1 to 5. 5 meaning it's the highest, 1 being the lowest. And ultimately you'll get a score at the bottom, which will help you prioritize the niches against one another. So now what I want to go through is some of the specific columns so you know what it is you're ranking against. So there's basically 13 different criteria or ranking factor here. The top 4 are the most important. I'd say the top 4 are essential, meaning you need to have a high rank in all these 5. Otherwise, this is just not going to be a good market to go after for your offer. All the ones below the top 4 are very important, but they're also kind of a nice to have, meaning like you could do without them, but they do make it easier. So again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to pick the niche that has the highest score, but ultimately remember that the top 4 matter the most. All 4 of those have to have a high score on the 1 to 5 rating. So the first criteria is market quality. Is this actually a good market to go after? Mainly, is this a big and is this a growing market? If there's only 100 people in your market, that's probably not going to be a good fit. And if it's a market that's really going like out of style, or it's like shrinking, it's just not where the world's going, then it's better to avoid that as well, because that's just going to make things more difficult. The second criteria is purchasing power. Can this market actually afford my product or service? Now, if you're selling something expensive and you're trying to reach college students, you're probably going to be having an uphill battle there, right? So just make, you don't have to go after rich people, but just make sure that like whatever market, whatever person you're trying to reach, they can actually, afford what you're selling. Otherwise, it's just going to make things way more difficult. So for example, if you're targeting like a local small business, like a restaurant or a chiropractor, and your service is $10,000 a month, it's probably going to be pretty hard, and you probably want to go upmarket a bit. So just take a minute to think about can this person actually afford my product or service? And if you've been doing this for a little bit and you get told very, very often that hey, this is too expensive for me, because I hear that from a lot of people, starting a business that, oh, no one can afford my product or service. It doesn't have to do with, no one can afford it. It's more about you're reaching the wrong part of the market. And the cool thing is about outbound prospecting is we're going to teach you how to reach anybody. If you've been relying on referrals or relying on your network to get clients for your business, the problem is you don't choose where that business comes from. But the great thing about what we're teaching you here is that you can actually point this and focus it in any direction and really work with who your dream clients are. So number 2 is purchasing power. They need to be able to afford your product or service. Criteria number 3 is, do they have a strong need or a strong pain point that you can solve? So if what you sell is actually like solving an important issue for someone, that's going to be much easier than, if it just kind of makes their life or business like a tiny bit better. So just try to think like, what problem do I actually solve? And try to find a market that actually has that problem, very deeply. So for example, if you're selling digital marketing services, that's going to solve a really important problem for the average local business, because most, restaurant owners or gym owners or something like that, they're not really experts in digital marketing. And it's also very hard to stand out when they're in a pretty commoditized industry. So that's just an example of how you can think about how the different markets have an important problem to solve or not. Criteria number 4 would be, are these people easy to reach? So if your target market is like 90-year-old people, that's going to be really, really hard to reach online, right? So just think for a second, can I find these people online? Now, what we're teaching you here is, email and LinkedIn outreach. And for most businesses, it's going to be pretty easy to reach those people through those two methods. Everyone in the world has an email, so that's why we're teaching you this here. So for the most case, you shouldn't have a problem, but just think for a second if the niches that you want to go after are really hard to reach or they should be generally easy to find online. So again, you're ranking all of these factors on a 1 to 5 scale. So those are the most 4 important. Everything below is, again, a nice to have. Next would be familiarity, meaning do you have past experience in this industry or knowledge? This is not a big deal because either way, after you work in the industry for a while, you'll gain that experience, you'll gain that knowledge, but you will have a head start if you already have experience like working with those types of people. Next would be having connections. Again, not necessary, but if you already have a network in that space, it'll be easier to get a head start. You build up your network over time anyway, but it is a plus if you already have some network and some connections in that niche already and some people that can refer you around or vouch for you. The next criteria point would be, is it a blue ocean? Now what a blue ocean means is it's a market that's like very, very untouched. It's low competition. So just think like how competitive is your market, right? How many other people are trying to sell the same thing in your market? You don't need an exact number, but you can probably get a sense for how competitive this industry is. So a 5 would be low competition because that's a good thing. A 1 would be high competition. Now again, you can still succeed in a very competitive market. Ultimately, it's just going to be a little bit harder because you have to really focus more on like your offer and your positioning and what's unique about what you sell. So just because the market's very competitive doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but just be aware that if you can find some pockets of the industry that are less competitive, it just makes everything a whole lot easier. The next criteria point would be, are there any external market conditions that make this harder for me? So a 5 would be like no, a 1 would be like there's a lot. So these are things outside of your control. Think about like COVID and how that hit the travel industry, things like that. Maybe if there's anything happening in the world with the government or whatever where you live. So just think, are there any external conditions that would make this really hard for me to get into? The next one would be, where can I add the most value? Which basically means like this industry or this niche, do I have a lot of experience that I can help these people? Does this niche align with my strengths and past experience? So if it does, then that's great. Definitely put a 5 there because ultimately the more value you can give, the more customers you're going to get. Next criteria point is, do I find this interesting or enjoyable? Again, not an absolute plus, but if you kind of like your niche, if you're interested in what you do, it'll just be more fun and you'll have a little bit more energy and motivation for what you're doing and you'll enjoy having conversations with those prospects. So definitely a big plus if you have some kind of interest in the niche you're trying to offer your services to. Next one would be, is there anything special or unique about what you do that is actually useful to this market? So no matter what you're offering, there's probably some things about the way you do business that's really special or unique. Think about like any of that. Does any of that align to the niche that you're offering, right? So just think about whatever is unique about what you do and think like, would this market actually find that valuable? Because that'll be a huge competitive advantage if so. The next criteria point is on the delivery and fulfillment side of your business. Just think like, would this market or would this niche be easier to serve and easier to fulfill for other niches? Think back to all your past clients. If you've had a range of different clients, maybe some have been really just a joy to work with. They're easy, they don't complain a lot, they don't nitpick. Maybe some have been more of a pain in the butt. But either way, just try to use that as a guide to, would this be easier to serve than other niches? And if this is a new business and you haven't had past clients, don't worry about it. Just think about it the best you can, but don't get too caught up in it. And the last one is also on the delivery side. The last criteria factor would be, is this more profitable than other niches? Which really just comes down to, again, the previous one, like is it easy or are these people just going to be simpler to work with? Now again, this is not an exact science. If for some of these you just don't know what to put, don't worry about it at all. Give it your best guess. It's no big deal. Especially if you're new to doing business, you might not know a lot of this stuff. But either way, as you work with more clients, as you get your next 10 to 20 customers, then you'll start to really see like how all this will play out. So you could definitely revisit this over time. So again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to rank all of those criteria points from 1 to 5 and then total it up at the bottom. And then just kind of go with a gut feel. Hopefully by now you should be able to prioritize and rank some of the niches you're considering and pick the one that's the best to launch your first marketing campaign with us in this course. All right guys, so that's it for that resource. The next resource I want to walk you through is the ICP and buyer persona worksheet. Now, just quick note, make sure you're actually doing this. Do all the resources throughout the course as we're going through it. Otherwise, you're going to forget what all this even means later. So do the niche analysis template first, and then let's go on to actually this next part. So the ICP and buyer persona creation, This will help you get onto paper who your dream client is. So ICP stands for Ideal Customer Profile, and that means the actual company, like what does the company look like that you're trying to work with? And buyer persona is the person. Who is the person that you need to speak to that actually makes the decision on hiring you? So those are two things you want to be really, really clear on. A lot of times you're setting yourself up for failure if you're not clear on these two before. So make sure you know like what the qualities of that person look like. It's the same thing with something in your personal life. Imagine dating, right? It'd be way easier if you kind of know like who that ideal partner is, what they look like, what they act like, where they live. So it's really the same thing there, right? You want to kind of visualize what success looks like and who you want to go after, and then get right to it. So again, ICP is the ideal customer, meaning the company, and buyer persona is the person. You'll see on the resource attached that we have a lot of different characteristics for the ideal customer profile, like what industry are they in, what is the employee count. For example, like if you've had customers in the past that maybe it's a small business with like 10 employees, but you've also had customers that have maybe 100 employees, like a bigger company, those should not be lumped together. Your business can still serve those, but that's really a different avatar, and you should be doing this resource twice then. So just to clarify that, if you have a few different ideal customers in your business, which is totally fine, you want to segment those out. Those should be a different worksheet completed, and also those are different marketing campaigns. You can't lump together two wildly different people or two wildly different businesses in the same campaign, because like we talked about earlier, we want to be very specific in our messaging to actually catch people's attention, and it's really hard to kind of craft a message or an ad that's going to speak to like two people at opposite ends of the spectrum. So we have industry, we have their employee count and size. Is it a small business, a big enterprise company? Location as well. And again, maybe you work with clients in a few different countries, that's okay, just list them all. This is really more of a brainstorming exercise than anything for you to actually get clear. Number 4 would be miscellaneous characteristics. If nothing comes up, just leave it blank, but maybe if you work with like nonprofits or private companies or something like that, just put anything that comes to mind. Next would be list out how does that company handle the problem now? Like what do they use now, or how do they actually attempt to handle the problem that you solve? Because remember, you're not just pushing a product, you're solving a problem. So just think like, what is this company doing now to solve the problem? Let's say you provide video production services. How does this company handle it now? Do they have an in-house team? Do they use freelancers? Do they do nothing at all and they only use photos for their marketing? So it's really important to understand like how they solve it now, because it'll make it a lot easier to visualize how you're going to be able to help them and kind of where they're coming from. And then the next bullet point for the ideal customer is what should you avoid with that company? This could be anything random, such as avoid companies that use Shopify, or avoid companies that have an internal marketing team already, or avoid nonprofits or something like that. If there's anything specific that you've learned that you aren't a good fit for who you want to work with, then just list that here. So now that you have all of that on a piece of paper, it'll be really easy to actually build your marketing campaigns later because you know exactly who you're going after. And this exercise should be exciting. This is really more about like finding who that dream prospect is. Once you've listed out what the qualities are of your ideal customer, the next is the buyer persona. The buyer persona is simply like, who is the person that I want to reach? What is their job title? What do they like, etc. So the first one is job title. Now, most of the time you might have a few different job titles. Maybe you've worked with owners in the past, or maybe you've worked with the marketing team, or like a sales manager, whatever it is. So just put all the ones that are relevant. And if you're kind of getting started in a brand new industry, just put your best guess. If it's a small business, you're most likely going to be working with the owner. If there's less than 10, 20 employees in the company, most of the time you're dealing with the owner for all decisions. As you go to bigger companies, then usually you're dealing with some kind of mid-level management or something like that, like a marketing director or operations manager or whatever it is. So keep in mind that if you're going after much bigger companies, you're probably not going to be reaching out to the owner with much success. So put all of the job titles that are relevant. Next is put the priorities of that person. Think about like, of course the company has its priorities, but what are the specific priorities that this person has? So let's say you're reaching out to the marketing director. What are the specific things that are important to them, right? What are their goals in their role? What are they trying to achieve on a day-to-day basis? And again, if you don't know a lot of this, don't worry. You'll figure it out over time. And also we have a resource coming up that shows you how to actually like do this research for your market. This section is super, super important because this is what you want to be talking about in your marketing copy. Again, if you just go out telling everybody about, oh, my product's amazing, I have these features, this benefits, it does this, it falls on deaf ears, nobody really cares about that. People care about themselves, they care about their problems, their needs, their priorities. So that's why we want to really, really focus on getting clear on what those are, because when you can speak to someone's priorities, it's going to be a lot more interesting to them than just talking about how great your product is and just looking like another salesperson. So talk about their priorities, list out all the ones that come to mind. If you've had a lot of past customers, think about like, why did they hire you in the first place? What were they, what goal were they trying to achieve? How did your service fit into like what they're trying to achieve at their job, right? Usually for the business owner, it's something like grow the company, make more profit. Maybe they want to have more time with their family or whatever. And then usually for like lower in the company, like managers or mid-level, it could be something more specific, like maybe a specific KPI or a number they have to achieve, as part of their role. So list out all the things that are important to them. You could look at this also at a business level and a personal level. A business level would be, I want to make more profit and double the company this year. And a personal level would mean like, I want to feel more important, or I want to have more time away from my business. And then next up is goals, which is similar to priorities, but that's more of like, a really future endpoint, like something they really want to achieve. After that would be problems and frustrations. This is really important as well. So try to list out all of the problems and all of the frustrations, challenges that someone has that are relevant to actually what you're selling. So just think like, what problem am I solving and how does that show up in someone's life, right? So think about, the best way you can think about this is in their day-to-day, like how do they experience this problem, right? By not having the thing that I sell, what are some issues that could come up in their business or in their life? And how does that show up for them? What are the consequences of that? Really brainstorm as much as you can here, because this is going to be gold when you're writing your marketing copy later. The next point for your buyer persona would be, what are some potential objections or common questions that you have? So think about whenever you've done sales calls and actually presented your offer to potential clients before, what are usually the main reasons that they don't buy? What are the questions they have? What are the things they're concerned about that prevents them from moving forward? The more that you know that, the more you can really, really get in the mind of your customer. And the more that you can actually speak to that in your marketing copy, that way it kind of eliminates those concerns right from the get-go. So just think about all the reasons somebody wouldn't do business with you and all the reasons they've told you no, or just in general the questions they have, because then you can kind of put that right in the beginning of your process. Next is, how do they get benefit or value out of your service? So ultimately think about results, right? Don't think about like the features of what you offer. Think about the endpoint. So think about like outcomes here. Think about a future state. So after somebody uses your product and it's working for them, 6 months later, like how has that helped them in their business or life? And just list out all of the specific outcomes. The more specific you can get, the better. Because again, this is what you're selling. You're not selling your product. You're ultimately selling the result and the outcome that the product gets to somebody. Nobody buys your product just because they want their product. They buy it because they're trying to achieve something or obtain something in your business. And that's what you want to be very, very clear on. Like, what is the ultimate result that someone gets from working with me? Next up is decision-making process. This is usually pretty simple unless you're working with a very big company, but just think about like, how does the decision-making process go? Do they need to talk to their partner? Do they have to get like their legal team involved? Do they have to get it approved by their boss? So anything like that you've dealt with, try to just list out, what are the main sticking points in the decision-making process. And last up is just miscellaneous. So if there's anything that comes to mind as far as, what are the qualities of an ideal customer and what are they like, just anything that wasn't covered in the previous points, just list it out here under miscellaneous. And that's it. Now you're all set to go ahead right now and do this, fill this out, take your time with it. This is going to be a really valuable exercise and something that you hold on to for a long time. So take your time with it, brainstorm. Don't worry about it being perfect. You can definitely develop it and add it to over time. And very important that you should have more than one of these if you serve a lot of different types of customers. All right, so the next exercise is getting to know your market. So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand the target customer as much as possible and really get in their head, because that's where good marketing copy is going to come from. Once you can kind of really get this stuff down, it becomes very easy to actually know what to say in your marketing and in your cold outreach. So the point of this template is to show you like where you can go to actually do this research and find out more about your target customer. So in the previous templates, if you're just thinking like, man, how do I find out all of this? Then this resource is going to help you loads. Now, the first thing I recommend you do before even getting into this document is just think about your past customers. Think about like your 5 or 10 most successful customers, the ones that were the easiest to work with, everything was great, you made a good profit on it. Think about those, and that's really where you should kind of stem, the qualities from for your ICP and buyer persona. But on top of that, do this actual research. There's a lot of places you can just go online to find out this stuff. And especially if it's a new business and you haven't had a lot of past customers to analyze, then this resource will be your best friend. All right, so there's a few different ways you can go do this research and find out more about your target audience. On the resource attached, I listed out a few different places and ranked them, from most valuable and most effort to less valuable and less effort, just so you can know like what to prioritize. You don't need to do every little thing on the template attached. So the most valuable and highest effort research activity will be conducting customer interviews. This is the best thing because a lot of times in business, we try to just think from our perspective about like what's valuable about our product or service or like why someone should buy it or why it matters. But ultimately, we're not the customer, right? It's all about getting in your customer's head and understanding what they care about. Because again, sales is all about them, not you. The best place you can go to learn more about your target market is by actually talking to them. So conducting customer interviews is a great exercise. It does take a little bit of time, but the information that you'll get is gold. The vocabulary they use, the problems they state that they have. So this is going to be very helpful. Now, if you haven't had past customers, if this is a new business, you can still go out and interview your persona, right? You can reach out to people on LinkedIn and just say, hey, I'd love to just grab 50 minutes of your time. I'm new to the industry, and I would just love to pick your brain so I can make my offer more valuable and helpful to you guys. You'd be surprised how many people would actually say yes and give their time to a complete stranger. But if you've had past customers, then definitely start there. On the document, you'll see some example questions you can ask these people in an interview, such as like, before we worked together, how were you previously solving this issue? Why did you buy from us? Why did you choose us over competitors? What was the problem that you were hoping to solve? How was the problem affecting you? What would happen if you didn't solve that problem? And how did things change for the better after you worked with us? So again, that would be if you were talking to a customer, and if you were talking to someone who wasn't your customer, then you would just rephrase that a little bit differently or talk about like if they've shopped for your service in the past. Now, other than actually hopping on calls with people, there's some research that you can do on your own time, like right today. So here are some very highly valuable and also low effort sources. One would be looking at your own testimonials and your own case studies if you have it. So if you actually go and like read past testimonials you've got from previous customers or case studies that you've written from previous client projects, that's going to give you gold information. What you're looking for here is all of the patterns. Now, you can also do this with competitors as well. You can go to competitors' websites and look at all of their testimonials and look at all of their case studies. And you'll see in the testimonials like things that people say that, oh, I love the service because of XYZ, or I really appreciated XYZ, or I was having this problem and these guys came in and did this. And that's all the stuff that you want to really, really understand. Because again, the most important thing you want to understand about your buyer persona is, what are their goals, what are their priorities, and what problems are they solving? So that's the stuff you want to really look for when you're doing this research and looking at either your testimonials or competitors' testimonials. So next I'll explain some, decently valuable and also low effort sources. The ones I just showed previously are definitely going to be the most valuable, but these are also helpful as well. So first I would just say be a student of your market and try to like really, really listen to all the stuff that they listen to. Consume all the content that they consume. So for example, try to find podcasts that your target market listens to, blogs, newsletters they read, communities or forums or like Facebook groups they're a part of, industry reports or websites, like maybe there's trade associations, and also influencers they follow. If you can kind of just get a list of all that and just kind of casually go through that over time, you really start to get ahead for like what these people's worlds are like and what's important to them. And you can easily find these on Google or on social media. If you're trying to find podcasts in your industry, you can just go to like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify. There's plenty of podcasts there that you can find. So that's it. Those are the 3 categories of places you can go to research more about your target market. And as you're doing this, just take notes at the bottom of the document or on a piece of paper if you prefer it. But ultimately, what you're trying to do is you're trying to write down all the notes and all the things you learn, specifically relating to the problems, the priorities, and the goals. And also try to look for all the patterns. Not just patterns in what they say, but how they say it. The more that you can really know the vocabulary or the lingo or the specific phrases of your target market, the better. Because then you can start to talk like them and they'll see you as like a peer, as an insider, rather than just some random person. So really pay attention to all those little nuances and specific things and just write down heaps of this at the bottom of the document. Cool, that's it for this resource. Ultimately, this is something that you just do once and you can kind of just add to it over time, but definitely take your time. This is going to help you a lot. And what you learn in here, you can actually go back to your customer avatar or your buyer persona document and also add some of the findings in there too to make that more beefed up. All right, guys, now to bring this all to a conclusion, I want to share with you one last super powerful resource that'll help you get more specific and drill down your niche further. So you've probably heard this before, but it's better to specialize than to be a generalist. Think about it, like your local doctor or physician is not going to get paid as much as someone who's like a specialist doctor, like someone who specializes in brain surgery. It's the same in business, right? Because when you focus more on a specific area, then you can become an expert much faster in that, and you also have less competition. You're more unique, right? So the more that you can do that with your niche, the better. So I'm going to just show you some examples of how you can actually drill down your niche. So I'll use my business as an example, Revenue Boost. We sell, sales and marketing consulting for B2B companies. Now, if I was to go to this document down below, there's 3 sections. There's niche, there's offer, and then unique method or mechanism. So basically there's 3 different ways you can specialize. Some companies, they specialize in a certain industry. Some companies, they serve a bunch of industries, but they specialize in like a very specific service or offer. And some companies do both. There's no right or wrong answer, but I just want you to understand the different ways that you can specialize. So how can you take an industry and drill down further? Basically on this document, you want to go down each layer and just try to see like how much more specific you can get it. Just as an exercise, then you would ultimately pick one that you would focus on. So if I was to start with a very general industry, like companies that have a sales team for our company, that's pretty generic. But I could drill down one step further to going to B2B companies with a sales team instead of B2C. Then I can make it more specific by saying small to mid-sized B2B companies. Or I could even say, marketing agencies that are doing under $10 million annually. Or marketing agencies that are doing under $10 million annually in US or Canada. So you see how you can kind of keep making it more and more specific. Now you don't need to go too specific, but just as an exercise, try to see like how much you can drill it down. And again, like we talked about earlier, think about your past customers that were the most successful and what were the qualities of them, right? Now number 2 would be your offer. So do the same thing with your offer. And again, this is just a brainstorming exercise. You don't have to have this like perfect. It's just for you to understand like where you can go with your business. But if I take my offer at Revenue Boost, I could call it sales consulting, or I could do it on sales consulting on lead generation, or one step further, which is what we do sales consulting on outbound lead generation. And then to go one step further, I could say, we do sales consulting on outbound lead generation, and we're specialists in cold email and LinkedIn for marketing. Now, doesn't that last one sound a lot better than just saying that I'm another sales consultant? Because there's plenty of those out there. Now, number 3 would be, if you can find a unique method or a unique mechanism, meaning if you can like have a very specific way or a proprietary way of, delivering the thing you deliver, that's also a lot better. This is usually a little bit harder, and also if you're a new business, you probably haven't figured this out yet. But if you can just take your offer and think like, what is special about that? Is the way I deliver that special or unique? And then find a cool name for it. That's another way that you can specialize, right? So like, for me, I can say like, oh, we have proprietary messaging sequences as an example, as far as like, our copywriting strategies. And that's something I could say to a customer that would make them more interested to work with us. So try to take what you do and see like, are there any specific parts of it that are very unique to you that you can talk about? And even better if you can find like a cool name for it. And then to the right, you'll see, you can combine like 1 and 3 or 1 and 2 or 2 and 3. Basically, if you want to just combine like a few of these different factors, then you can also get your business even more specific. So maybe you specialize in a specific service for a specific industry. So in that case, you're just trying to combine both of them together into one big sentence to really, tie it all together. So that's it for this document, and that's it for this lesson. Go complete all these resources now. It'll be super, super helpful when we get into the meat of this later. And I hope that was helpful. I'll see you in the next one.